What would you do if the person you loved most died in front of you, and then came back in your child's body? People ask what real loss feels like, what it means for life to turn cold in a single moment. Sometimes it is not dramatic. Sometimes it is just this. You are sitting alone at your kitchen table, reheating breakfast, half listening to the television, and suddenly a news report quietly tells you that the life you had a few hours ago is already gone. Today, I want to talk about The Secret, a novel by Keigo Higashino. At the center of the story is a man named Hirasuke Sugita, an ordinary factory worker who has lived a quiet, unremarkable life for nearly 40 years. His wife Noko is capable and warm, and their daughter Monami is bright and full of life. Just a small, ordinary family living an ordinary life. And that is exactly why what happens next feels so cruel. One morning in March of 1985, Hirasuke comes home after a night shift. His wife and daughter are away for a funeral, so he eats breakfast alone. He turns on the television, heats up the food Noko prepared, and barely pays attention to the news. There has been a bus crash. A coach has fallen into a ravine. He does not care. All he wants to know is whether his favorite sumo wrestler has won. Then the reporter starts giving names. Suddenly Hirasuke hears that among the victims are his wife and daughter. In an instant, everything becomes unreal. He drops to the floor in front of the screen, staring in disbelief. The bus on the news is the very one they were on. He rushes to the hospital, but Noko is barely alive, and soon she dies. It becomes the last time he will ever see his wife as herself. The doctors tell him that Monami may survive, but she may never wake up. In just a few hours, Hirasuke loses the center of his world. His wife is gone, and his daughter exists somewhere between life and absence. There is nothing he can do except sit beside her hospital bed and wait, hoping that at least one part of his family will come back. A few days later, a firefighter tells him the truth about the accident. In the moment of the crash, Noko used her own body to protect Monami. That is why the girl survived. This truth does not comfort him. It breaks him even more deeply because even in her final second, Noko was still protecting their child. Then, just as the grief becomes unbearable, something impossible happens. Monami wakes up, but when she speaks, she does not call him Dad. She calls him her husband. At first, Hirasuke thinks he is hallucinating. Then he thinks trauma has damaged her mind. But the more she speaks, the more undeniable the truth becomes. The body is Monami's, but the consciousness inside is Naoko's. This is the cruel premise of the story. If your wife dies and your daughter survives, that is already unbearable. But what if they become one person? What are you supposed to feel then? Relief, horror, love, guilt? Hirasuke cannot answer any of these questions. He searches for explanations, reads about paranormal cases, but finds nothing. In the end, he accepts the only possibility left. Noko's soul is living inside Monami's body. Once he accepts this, a new problem appears. What should they do now? If they tell the truth, no one will believe them. At best, they will be seen as insane. At worst, everything will be destroyed, so they make a decision. Noko will continue living as Monami. And from that moment, the real story begins. At home, they share something like a married life that cannot be spoken. Outside, they act as father and daughter. This strange dual life gives Hirasuke a sense of comfort at first. He feels that he has not truly lost Noko. It feels as if the family is still there, just in a different form. But this comfort does not last. Time does not stop for grief. Monami's body continues to grow. Puberty arrives, adolescence arrives, and slowly Noko is pulled into the life of a teenage girl. Even if her mind still carries adult memories, her world is changing. She is surrounded by school, friends, youth, and new possibilities. And this is where the real pain begins. At first, they try to maintain the old life. Noko comes home and does housework. Hirasuke comes home and eats dinner. It looks normal from the outside, but it is not. Every morning, Hirasuke walks his wife to elementary school. It is something no one would believe, yet it becomes part of his daily routine. Meanwhile, the story also follows the aftermath of the accident. Hirasuke attends meetings with the victims' families, where grief, anger, and compensation are discussed. People argue about money, about responsibility, about apologies, but everyone knows the truth. No amount of money can bring back a life. At one of these meetings, the bus driver's widow tries to apologize, but most families cannot accept it. Her husband caused the crash through exhaustion. Why should they forgive? Yet Hirasuke later escorts her home and discovers that her family is extremely poor. This raises another question. Why was the driver working himself to death? Where was the money going? As Hirosuke investigates this mystery, something else begins to change at home. Naoko starts thinking about her future. She wants to study harder, enter a better school, become independent. She is no longer just trying to preserve the past. She is trying to build a new life, and Hirosuke cannot accept it. On the surface, he jokes about her ambitions, but inside he feels shaken. The person he loves is still there, but she is changing, moving forward, becoming someone new. He starts asking himself a painful question. Did I lose my wife or did I lose my daughter? The answer is both, and that is what makes it unbearable. As time passes, his emotions grow more complicated. He feels loneliness, desire, guilt, and confusion. He cannot move on, yet he cannot go back. When he tries to seek comfort elsewhere, it only makes things worse. He realizes that his love has nowhere to go. It has become something trapped and impossible. At the same time, Naoko continues to grow into her new life. She enters a better school, meets new people, experiences youth again. For Hirosuke, this becomes a source of jealousy, not because he does not love her, but because she is able to move forward while he remains stuck. This jealousy slowly turns into control. He listens to her phone calls, reads her diary, invades her privacy. Each act gives him a brief sense of satisfaction, but also pushes them further apart. Eventually, everything breaks. When Naoko discovers what he has done, he explodes, trying to justify himself. After that moment, Naoko withdraws. She becomes quiet, distant, and her dreams begin to fade. Only then does Hirosuke realize what he has done. He has hurt the very person he was trying to hold on to. But the story does not stop there. Through his investigation, Hirosuke finally uncovers the truth about the bus driver. The man had been secretly sending money to his former family, even though the child was not biologically his. At first, it seems confusing, even foolish. But then the truth becomes clear. Love is not about possession. It is about giving. It is about wanting someone else to live well, even if you are no longer part of their life. This realization changes Hirosuke. For the first time, he understands that if he truly loves Naoko, he must let her live her own life. He must stop holding on to the past and allow her to move forward. He apologizes and begins to treat her as Manami, not as his wife. But just when it seems like things might find some balance, the story delivers its final twist. One day, Monami appears as herself. Her real consciousness returns, still frozen in the past, still unaware of everything that has happened. Naoko had not replaced her. She had only been there while Monami's mind was asleep. From that moment on, mother and daughter begin to alternate within the same body. They leave messages for each other, trying to understand and communicate. But over time, Manami stays longer, and Naoko appears less. Hirosuke realizes the truth he tried to avoid. He is going to lose Naoko again. In the end, Naoko asks to meet him one last time. At the place where they first fell in love, they talk, remember, and say goodbye. When she thanks him for bringing her there, he understands. This is the final farewell. He cannot even cry properly. He wants to call her name, but no sound comes out. Years later, Manami grows up, builds a life, and prepares for marriage. Hirosuke carries everything in silence. Then he discovers something impossible. Manami's wedding ring was made from Naoko's ring, the one hidden long ago. That secret should have been known only to them. In that moment, he understands everything. Naoko did not simply disappear. She chose to disappear. She chose to live on as Manami, to give her a future, to protect the people she loved. She gave up her identity so that life could continue. At the wedding, when Hirosuke sees Manami in her dress, he sees Naoko too, not as a ghost, not as something supernatural, but as something that lives on in a deeper way. He understands that there is no need to ask questions. Some truths are not meant to be spoken. This is why the story stays with you. It is not just about mystery or identity. It is about love under impossible conditions. Love that becomes painful, jealous, selfless, and ultimately transformative. Some people choose to hold on. Some people choose to let go. And sometimes, the deepest form of love is choosing to disappear so that someone else can live fully. Life is already hard enough. Not every truth needs to be exposed. Some secrets are meant to be carried quietly, because sometimes what feels like an ending is not really the end. It is the beginning of a different kind of love.